really excited about presenting Cloudian today. Cloudian has been a product that Eagle's offered for about 8 months now, maybe a little bit longer than that. But more importantly, we are a consumer of Cloudian as well. So some of our infrastructure in the Eagle Cloud is back-ended by Cloudian technology. So a lot of our Commvault Dash as a service and those type of things are all supported with the S3 protocol that Cloudian provides. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that throughout the presentation, but again, we're not just out there looking for the next dollar, so to speak. We did a lot of investigation with this product. We put it through its paces through an extensive proof of concept, and ultimately decided that this was kind of a no-brainer, to be honest, to introduce into our solution for our cloud offerings. So very excited again to have that on board with us. So real quickly, there are a few customers on. I appreciate you guys joining us for this this new offering and learn a little bit more about it. But there's a couple new customers out there, or new potential customers out there, so I wanted to explain a little bit about who Eagle is again. We've been around a while, so this is our logo transition over the years. We started looking like Eagle Snacks, and we've evolved and changed the name into Eagle Technologies now. So we were established in 1981, and I'm not part of the founding team. I'm too young for that, but just barely. So I started in '87. So it's been a fun ride. So my senior engineer calls it 259 dog years. So we've been around quite a while. The space shuttle above, was launched that same year, but actually it launched before we were founded. So we can't actually say that we are older than the space shuttle. But we do plan to outlist Java, which is the most important thing. Most of you don't like Java, and we fit right into that with the rest of the crew. So hopefully we outlast Java here. So we do have a strong focus on the data center. So that's what we do for a living. Servers isn't a main focus, but we do a lot of servers, to be honest, more servers than storage in a lot of respects. It's obviously a peripheral product for making anything work. Networking, storage, and compute, all part of that offering. What I focus on, and about half of Eagle's business, is business continuity, backup, orchestration, managed services, how to protect data, how to get data to the end user and make it available, and those type of things. And then there's obviously additions to that, the e-discovery, the compliance, and all those things that are really a requirement in today's business world. The edge, do some things around there, but a lot around compliance and backup. It's amazing how much intellectual property sits on your laptop that you take home, put in your car, run through the airport, forget it in security, and all your data is lost at that point. So how do we protect that edge is a big thing. And a lot of e-discovery environments now require to include the edge data sets as well. And then I touched on it a little bit, and we'll touch on it more throughout the presentation, but we do have a cloud offering as well. Some people want to offload the backup and data management piece of their day-to-day workload with us, and we have been doing backup since 91. So we were founded in 81, been doing backup since 91. We consider ourselves really industry experts in that, and spend a lot of time with continuing to learn that skill and that trade, and offering that to our customers, that knowledge to our customers. So last slide, overall philosophy of Eagle, my personal philosophy, my soapbox, as you say, is I really think it's all about the data. It's about the ones and zeros. And what do we do with that data is really make it accessible to end users. That is, everybody on this phone call today, that's your job. Right, wrong, or indifferent, your goal is to make data accessible to users in a format that they can consume it. So whether it be a spreadsheet, a database, an application, Word document, whatever the case is, it helps them do business type things. It's your job to make that available to them. And everything else I affectionately call plumbing. It's just, how do I get data from point A to point B? And what do I store that on? So what's the plumbing parts? Obviously storage, and we offer several of these. Hypervisors, there's different types of hypervisors that come into play, databases, SQL, Oracle, etc., and even web type applications, Salesforce, Office 365, Azure, Amazon, those type of things. That, whether it be a pure SAN, whether it be a Nimble SAN, a Dell EMC SAN, or one of those, it really becomes just part of the plumbing, right? Well, as I mentioned before, we sell a lot of those plumbing parts. We think we do a great job of investigating those, but more importantly, if I had to summarize what we do, is we basically make that very simple and transparent to you as an end user, and consolidate that into a very consumable, easy to manage product. Our tagline is people making technology easy, and we truly do think we found the kind of the secret sauce to making that happen. A lot of great solutions out there, but if they're too complex to use, or they're too complex to use all of them, it doesn't become a good plumbing part. It becomes an expensive plumbing part, right? So that's a big skill. But at the end of the day, we can't lose the focus and the vision of the fact that it's really all about the data, and it's really about giving user access to that data, whether it be in your data center and this storage solution with this hypervisor, with this application, or whether it be in the event of a disaster, how do I get that data back to the end user? And that's, again, what we try to focus on and what we do for our customers. So with that, I will stop gabbing, and I will turn it over to Chris and talk a little bit about Cloudian while he tees this up and starts sharing his desktop. Again, we are a consumer of it. We did a lot of due diligence with Cloudian before we decided to take it on, and it's been a rock solid product. Happy to put anybody on this call in touch with my lead engineer that manages that, and he can give you real world experiences about it. And he absolutely loves this product. Easy to use, upgrades are seamless, no downtime. No compatibility issues with any of the applications we've thrown at it, which has been really key. And again, when we were growing our own, we had so many FETs or FTEs, I'm sorry, that had to manage this. It was pretty intense. So that all went away when we picked on Cloudian. So I will shut up now. Chris, I will let you take it over. Chris is the sales engineer for Cloudian and helping us present today. Again, I will try to monitor the chat with Chris and interrupt and ask questions as we go, and we're happy to answer them.
Well, thanks, Dave. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, you sound great.
Okay. Well, and if that changes, you guys feel free to interrupt me. But thanks, everyone, for joining us this morning. My name is Chris Biggins, a sales engineer here in the Midwest. Paired up with Dave Cavill, who is the regional sales manager, also covering the same states that I do. So just want a quick high-level agenda around the introduction of Cloudian and our product called Hyperstore, and really kind of touch on the importance of S3 and where it may fit in your data center, and kind of get into a little bit of history on why Amazon decided to create that. Incidentally, was the anniversary, I think, of the creation was just this past week. It was about 13, 14 years ago. Then we'll touch on Hyperstore architecture. What does it look like? And then we're also going to touch on the major features. So not only is it an S3 platform that you could leverage in your environment, but also what are the additional features on top of that we offer. And then finally, we'll touch on the Cloudian evaluation process if you folks would like to give it a go in your environment. And then obviously we can stop for questions at any point. So high-level introduction. So this is the proverbial manufacturer slide. I mean, I think everybody is under pressure. And I've been on the industry side now over 12 years, starting on the customer side 20 years ago. And I always laugh, you see these slides, yeah, of course everybody's company is making data. But I think a little bit more interesting though is that I think it's actually becoming more and more difficult to manage that data. And I think if we think about you can manage things that maybe in the dozens of ranges, but then you start getting into many petabytes that we're starting to see, that even hundreds of terabytes that corporations are managing today. Budget and staffing are a complete challenge. And so while there are some cloud options out there, public clouds, AWS, Azure, etc., there are still many reasons why corporations require to store their data on premises. And some of the reasons are listed on the left here. That performance, no matter what happens in public clouds, you still have to be able to get to that data, and a lot of times networking, getting to that data there can be performance challenges. Security, some companies have their own way of doing security that's different than sometimes the providers offer today. And there's compliance and cost of access that are also big drivers of why corporations still have data in their own data centers. So Amazon created the S3 API back about 12, 13 years ago for this very reason. If we think about the Amazon business model, it's massive scale, and the technologies at the time, particularly around files, weren't appropriate to run their business. So they created S3, and their sheer scale of S3 now, if we think about how large Amazon is, I believe they come in around $8 billion a quarter in that business unit. S3 being created by Amazon has become a de facto standard just on their sheer scale. We're going to quickly touch on storage architecture. So most folks, and where a lot of my history is in the block storage and file protocols storage devices, where if we think about block storage in your data center, it's very well suited for device storage in a traditional SAN environment usually. And many times you're using databases and things of that nature. And then file protocols came along, probably in the 90s, to really share data easily amongst computers. But it's a hierarchical structure, and it's layered over block storage typically. And it's fine to a certain extent. And then when the advent of object really comes into play with a lot of the hyperscalers and major corporations out there today, where they needed something different. And that's really, object storage is really all about infinite scalability and accessibility to that infinite storage in a very easy and common way. So that's where Cloudian comes in. Cloudian, historically, we were born out of the telco industry, where we were our founders were in the messaging space, and they realized about 7, 8 years ago that they could easily port that that messaging capability they had in the product at the time and apply it to the S3 world and come up with object storage. We'll talk about hybrid cloud this morning. It's an ideal solution for hybrid cloud in that your data is easily portable between your data center and public cloud, should you ever need to do that. And finally, we'll show you that you can start small and scale to hundreds of petabytes, which gives customers some comfort knowing that this isn't an all or nothing proposition as far as commitment. And that's kind of what we're trying to depict here, where literally you can, it comes in a server form factor, as little as 3 servers. You could begin growing your own S3 storage cloud within your own data center, or in a hosting provider's data center, with your full control over it. And you could grow literally to hundreds of petabytes without incurring any downtime. What types of data are really effective for this platform, for this S3 platform? It really mimics what's appropriate in Amazon or Azure Blob. We're talking about backup archive use cases where folks like Eagle have taken advantage of Commvault's ability to use the S3 protocol. But you may be in a situation where you have to provide storage as a service to your business. Maybe you're in the media and entertainment business, so really does really well with video type files, so you'll see security and surveillance as well. So they're kind of tied together, that media and entertainment and security and surveillance. It's all about video data, and that is very well suited, very large files. Customers have a lot of trouble managing those with traditional tape. A great use case for us. And then if you were in the bioinformatics, they have just gobs of data that they're trying to manage as well. But it's really around sequential type access that you might find on a NAS, traditional NAS subsystem, that this is well suited for. Why does S3 compatibility matter? Just to touch on that, again, the actual, the sheer weight of Amazon S3 has driven this standard. Therefore, we're seeing many managed service providers and application providers porting their software to take advantage of S3. So S3 compatibility, in our view, and I think in our customers' view, offers investment protection without having to re-platform to something else in 3 or 4 years. Diving a bit into S3 functionality, where it's different is the connectivity is over HTTP and HTTPS. So that really allows, on the right-hand side of this slide, applications that can access this storage from anywhere on the planet, right? HTTP is just a standard protocol of the internet, so different application platforms can take advantage of it natively, as well as vendors such as Commvault that are able to store their data in this platform. So here at Cloudian, we have some unique features. We're going to touch on them this morning. We have a 100% native Amazon S3 API. So if you have an application that or a vendor in your stack that claims they can use Amazon S3 storage, it will work with us. Multi-tenancy and QoS billing, that's really helpful for those of you that may have to do show back, maybe even shame back to your business, or maybe you function as a managed service provider, such as Eagle. We have some features that really allow that to show that usage back to the business. Policy data protection, we're going to touch on this. It's not an all or nothing proposition. This isn't like a normal storage array where you can define RAID 6 or RAID 5 or various protection features for your storage. On a per bucket, S3 has a thing called a logical structure called a bucket, and on a per bucket basis, you can define how well that data should be protected. Some data types may require very little data protection because you can regenerate that. So a lot of flexibility there. Policy-based tiering on the slide is really all about being able to tier this data to another instance or entity. So in our world, I could tier a bucket from within one Cloudian Hyperstore platform to another Cloudian Hyperstore platform, or I could tier that data to maybe a provider such as Azure Blob Service. So a lot of flexibility there. Flexible deployment options we'll touch on, and then the one system for files and objects really touches on an acquisition we made about probably a year and a half ago, where we are entering the file sharing game. In certain use cases, we can allow object storage access via a NAS or NFS CIFS gateway. So that's what we're touching on there. So I'm going to hit the pause button here real quick. Any questions, Dave, or comments before we get into architecture?
I'm not seeing anything right at the moment, Chris.
Okay. All right.
Posted.
All right. I just wanted to get a sip of some beverage here before we talk some more. So architecture. So at its core, We are a software company, and our software resides on x86 servers. So what we would require are high-level CPU, RAM, capacity hard drives, good networking interfaces, and SSD drives. And SSD drives are all about processing metadata for us. The actual capacity drives are used for storing your data. So nothing extremely pertinent as from a hardware perspective. This is so our software can run on any x86 server. We're going to get into that here in a little bit. Choice of deployment model. So if we're a software company, you truly can deploy our software. Again, you have choice of our appliances, which are listed there. They come in the HSA 1500 series, which is a 1U server, or our HSA 4000, which is a 4-unit rack unit box that has 2 servers in it, up to 70 drives. Or you can run this software only. You could run on a virtual environment if you so chose, via virtual machine. Or you could run it on some Linux bare metal if you had it in your environment as well. And then also in that software column, if you chose, maybe you like Cisco servers or you like Dell servers, we have customers that run our software on both of those platforms as well as other server manufacturers. And then finally, you could run our software in Amazon, or I believe we're also in the Google marketplace of all things. We could run our software in those environments as well. Software licensing, if you would imagine, it's really a terabyte licensing model, although we do have some consumption models as well. But that's really what you're paying for, is where the per terabyte or consumption model running on any of these platforms. Quick look at our appliances. I did mention that they were 1U. It would be kind of the smaller size. I probably should update this slide. We are actually not offering the 4 terabyte drive options anymore because we actually added 12 terabytes now. So, but again, we have the correct sizes depending upon your need, should you want to go down the appliance path. So use cases we talked about, and how would any of these, the good news is that say you started in backup and archive, your application such as Commvault, like Eagle is using, they use the RESTful API S3 interface to send storage payloads to our environment. That is, it's a single namespace, and that's important because as you add nodes, the single namespace doesn't change. So whether you're running at 100 terabytes or adding a petabyte in a year after the fact, that single namespace never changes. So that's one of the powerful features of S3. But maybe in year 2 you have some storage as a service needs, and you need to add S3 capability for your software developers. You could create a logical space for your developers to use object storage. So the good news is this isn't a one and done use case. There are many ways that you can go about using the platform. Just a quick look, it's a distributed and elastic cluster. So here, what we're trying to depict is each node has all of the services running on them. So if any one of them were to be failed, or you had a maintenance event, maybe you had to add a network interface. Maybe you wanted to add more networking. You could take a node offline. The S3 HTTP endpoint that's advertised in this cluster, that is still online, and there is no downtime incurred for any changes you make to this cluster. So point being, it's a peer-to-peer and no single point of failure platform. So getting into features, so not only is this S3 storage, but what are some of the benefits of the Cloudian Hyperstore platform besides just having S3? Well, we're in the age of DevOps and rapid development. So if you have folks that are developing applications in the cloud today or even on-prem, what we're seeing from an application standpoint, a hard shift to really a programmable interfaces, even down to the infrastructure layer. And that's what this is all about, is everything that we can do in our administrative GUI is also available in an admin API. What this might mean is if you are doing rapid deployments and provisioning, you could do it programmatically, whether it's in the CLI or API or in our web GUI. You can quickly create these S3 buckets with parameters. Hybrid cloud tiering is another feature. This is where it gets into very interesting flexibility for customers. So say you had data, you had a client application, S3 here on the right, writing to the Cloudian hyperstore in S3, and maybe through your firewall, maybe you have Amazon Glacier. So you could literally tier data to Amazon Glacier natively from the Cloudian platform to Amazon Glacier. Maybe you just need a copy of data somewhere on the planet in the event your business failures occur for whatever reason, or there's a flood, right, and you need to recover that data. Or maybe for compliance, you just need a second copy somewhere. We allow you to do that. Obviously, you would need an account with Amazon in that instance, and pay those fees for storing that data. But again, a lot of flexibility for any of those clouds to be able to exercise their functionality with the data that you're storing on-prem with our solution. Another hybrid cloud example here is, for those of you that are familiar with some of these cloud providers, cross-region replication is where you could replicate data from one region to another region for a variety of reasons. But here we have, in the S3 world, something called a put is really a write operation. So here we're writing data maybe in Seattle, and we can replicate that data to another cluster here in Florida. What we're also trying to depict is another feature called versioning, and that, so we've kind of mixed the use cases here, but you could even take that a third step, and you can version objects maybe to even a third location on top of that. So again, depending upon the needs for your business, this may or may not be a feature that would apply to you. And here's where object lifecycle management comes in. Here's a screenshot of our user interface where we're looking at certain objects in a data store that you've created, or in an S3 bucket, not a data store. You could publish that bucket, and any of the folks that can get to HTTP, you can access that bucket in various ways, even for a certain amount of time. And here we're expiring data by rule. So everything after January is going to expire if it has a timestamp on that. So lifecycle management really gets into folks that they know they have data that could go away, maybe log files, right? Maybe you need log files for a month. You can send log files to this platform via S3 and then expire them because you won't need them past a certain day. That's just one example. Encryption. So for the security conscious folks, we're doing a lot of work with the federal government. As you can imagine, they're pretty sensitive around encryption. So you can deploy encryption in a number of ways, where you have a master key and envelope keys, and then you encrypt that data before it hits the S3 bucket on our platform. Or maybe you just send the object via SSL to us, and we'll encrypt it for you before it hits the bucket. And then finally, we on a per object basis, you maintain your own keys, and usually with the key management system, you own the keys, and then you just store the data encrypted in encrypted format. And to get that data off, we would have to use your key management system that you would provide. So a lot of flexibility around encryption. Compression, we can compress data. We have 3 different algorithms that can compress data on a per bucket basis. This is helpful for data types that are compressible. So if we think back to the different use cases I outlined earlier, things like video data really aren't compressible. So if you had camera data stored, you wouldn't really want to flag that data for compression, but maybe log file data because they're just text files. So again, there is a little bit of overhead from a CPU standpoint, but again, trying to drive efficiencies. And when you're talking, if you're talking even 20-30% on a 100 or 100 terabytes or even a petabyte that many of our customers are using today, that could add up over time. Versioning, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but you can version data on a per bucket basis. So anything that hits this logical entity called an S3 bucket, if your application uploads another file of that same name and stores it in the bucket, it would just be another version on top of it. It would advertise, obviously, the latest version, but you can go and pull previous versions. And that versioning is in its entirety, it's a brand new copy of that data. That may be something handy for you in the event. We have heard reports of folks that have been involved in ransomware, for instance, and so versioning may help some customers for their sensitive data. Wouldn't do that maybe for all your data, but certain things like I know in my previous life or previous employment, we heard about a hospital system that was ransomed for audio files for their doctors. So it was pretty serious stuff. So that may or may not be applicable to you, but versioning is pretty powerful. Multi-tenancy, really, and I think this is where one of the reasons Eagle may have looked at us as well. If you're functioning as a organization that is a managed service provider type deployment, you can set up users in groups logically and tie them to a quality of service that they've paid for or signed up for, and then you can institute chargeback reports against those quality of service rules. Again, and then obviously you can encrypt that data, if you are functioning as a managed service provider as well. QoS is obviously tightly coupled with the multi-tenancy, where again you can set limits by storage bytes, storage object numbers, requests per minute, inbound or outbound type charges. So you could do some rate limiting in our QoS. So again, if you have many clients or many folks, you can have them sign up for your offering and offer them a certain level of service. Pretty handy for those of you that have to function in that way. And then finally, a smart support. Well, it's not finally. A smart support is offered as part of the platform. Smart support is our automated real-time monitoring and analytics, and so we get data, just metadata. We don't get data. We just the metadata about your platform, and offer proactive resolution. We have quite a few folks around the world. Surprisingly, when I got here, I was surprised to learn we have folks in Europe. We have the United States, even in the Central Time Zone, and in Asia. So we have you covered as the day moves along. So finally, we're going to wrap up with something a little more nebulous. S3, if we think about all the different ways that you can access S3 storage, one of the hidden gems about S3 is, and this is what makes this platform extremely powerful, is that it's all about metadata in our system, and S3 in general really allows customers to now tag their data in an intelligent and custom way. So what we have depicted here is maybe video files, old archives. So we have a very large media organization that runs a variety show that has over 500 shows to archive, and typically they'd have to go back to tape to pull the archive to get any footage from those old shows. But now with us, here we have on the right a screenshot where they've instituted some custom tagging with their media management software to allow for intelligent search on that data to be able to pull that back. Maybe you wanted to see a certain actor in a certain season. They now have that ability at their fingertips as opposed to having to go into the library and pull something out. So taking it a step further, it's a little busy of a slide, but for them, they had producers, they'd ingest the data, they'd edit it and finish it, and then they'd have a prep process, and then they'd write it out to an archive. And the important part here is, where is the search? The search is at the archive itself, and in this case, it was LTO tape. But after this, now search is now searchable across the entire object store, which is Hyperstore. And also, you could take that search even out to AWS Glacier, maybe another archive curation. So it really allows customers to search that archive as soon as it enters and is archived, and they're able to monetize more over time. So again, if we think about really what's next is now even in video now I can get metadata about general attributes. In this example, it's really about video, but you could take this to any data type, any object stored on our platform. You could develop custom tagging, whether it's video or even maybe a check writing application. It doesn't matter. You could develop custom ways of storing that data, so it gives you some intelligence when you go to look for it later. So to wrap it up, at least my portion will open up the floor. We do offer 45-day evaluations. We could stretch that a little bit longer, but I mean, generally folks know within the first 2 weeks whether or not our platform is appropriate for the solution that they're trying to apply our situation or our platform to. So step one would be to contact our friends here at Eagle. The high-level requirements, the easiest way to evaluate this is to use 3 virtual machines. It could be Hyper-V, could be VMware, seems to be the most popular one for us at the moment. And it's really about 60-minute install process. We have a little homework to do ahead of time around DNS and depending upon the use case, maybe firewall, but really it's not a heavy lift from an evaluation standpoint. So again, just contact Eagle and we'd be happy to help out and when the time's right. So with that, Dave, I'm going to open up the floor here, take a breath, and maybe listen to some questions.
Okay. I don't actually think we have anything in the chat. Let me look again. But yeah, reminder everybody, Zoom has chat. I was kind of interested to learn that Zoom is actually a consumer of Cloudian as well. So
yes, we're pretty happy they're on board. And I use the recording feature within Zoom, and probably 15 minutes, sometimes a half hour later, I get access to my recording, depending upon how large it is. So that's all stored on our platform.
I was wondering what data set was growing for them, and that makes sense. The recorded webinars and voiceovers probably as well. But that's interesting stuff. But yeah, anybody that has a question, feel free to chat. Again, we did this exact vetting process. So we spun up some virtual machines. We did a 6-node because we wanted to use the erasure coding feature, and I understand that. We put it on top of our existing storage and ran it. It actually performed very well, even though we weren't doing performance testing, we were just doing compatibility testing. So I would highly encourage people, if they want to take a look at it, that's a pretty simple and straightforward, to your point, an hour investment of time and you're off and running, and we could sure help with that. We have some pretty sharp folks here around Cloudian, obviously, because we're a user of it as well. But yeah, that is probably the best way to get introduced to the product. The other thing that I would bring to and maybe get get your feedback on this too, Chris. But the one thing that's interesting to us, obviously, is we are a consumer of Commvault, and we use Cloudian for that target storage for our long-term archive. So it's not necessarily our tier 1 landing zone. It's not our primary copy, but that's where we send our long-term retention to, our remote copies and those type of things. And that's where a lot of people are leveraging Cloudian. That's where we met Cloudian, was at a Commvault national convention, their Commvault Go conference. So with that said, though, Cloudian to us is more exciting for our customers and even for our cloud offering, that we can now consolidate storage. So any of the applications that you may have out there, and if you guys like to have some entertainment here, do a little bit of looking online and just say, hey, what's an S3 compatible application, and see all of the different applications out there that support S3 as a target. Commvault being one of them, but even the Veeam users out there, I think, are finally getting S3 capabilities out of the box. There's a lot of different ISV applications out there that will write S3 for long-term archive, document management systems. All of this is starting to use that RESTful API, and now I have a consolidated platform, and that plumbing becomes very interesting then, because we want to keep that as simple, easy to manage. That's what's so attractive about the cloud. But what we found is the economics is really where the wins come in. So, you know, Chris showed you some of the different platforms, and we are a consumer of their hardware as well. We didn't go out and roll our own. They basically do a pass-through on the hardware from what we could tell, and that way it's on a reference architecture that they help support. So that was the easy button for us. But basically you start looking at that, whichever platform that fits your capacity needs, and you can mix and match those. So you can start with the 1U units and move to the larger units in the same namespace, that type of thing. The cost per gigabyte per month was amazing. So it really allowed us some flexibility in our offerings and for our customers as well. So consolidation and cost savings is where it's at. I'm not sticking my head in the sand about where the cloud is appropriate as well. And you saw Chris's presentation there, is that cloud is a target for Cloudian. If I want to offload some of that workload into Amazon as well, we can absolutely do that, which is, again, just showing some of the flexibility of the product. I got kind of on a rant there, so I'll let you add a little color to that as well, Chris.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, I think that the hybrid cloud, abilities for Hyperstore, I think a lot of people are looking at that, not just for storage, but I mean, if we think back to this whole metadata example, if we think about metadata, maybe customers are starting to wonder, I've got so much data that customers they love, or at least in my experience, they usually gravitate towards solutions that have leverage. And what I mean by that is that, well, if I stick all my data in Amazon, but what if in 5 years I want to get my data out of there? What are my costs? And then they start asking, well, why do I use entities like the cloud? Well, it's really, maybe in some examples such as this, maybe I could take some of my data or all my data or a copy of my data off of Cloudian, and I put it in Amazon. Let's just use Amazon for example, and I run my analytics. I run whatever application that processes that large amount of data, and maybe I only get the answers back, and I just discard the data in my public cloud entity. So that way I'm not incurring costs on taking the data back out if I so chose to. So that's, I mean, it's one use case that somebody's described for me. I haven't seen it a lot, but it's kind of tantalizing, because I think we're in a world where customers are looking at this and saying, well, you're right. If I'm at 100 terabytes today without breaking a sweat of real important data, and I'm growing at 20% per year, you know, where do I want to keep that data? Where do I get the leverage? And this may be you know, a point for folks to think about where their data should live, because as those data sets grow, and if I, for whatever reason, want to make a change in my provider, yeah, we'd like to think that we give customers a lot of flexibility in their go forward strategy, in really around the unstructured data type.
Yeah, I would add to that a little bit. Again, I think it does give a good choice. I mean, there's obviously the logistics and the performance issues of having storage on-prem and next to the compute, closer to the compute, so that if you did need that data back, it's a lot faster in many cases. There are getting to be faster pipes, obviously, to the cloud, which is, you know, solving some of those problems. But at the end of the day, I think the cloud's real benefit continues to be elasticity, right? So the ability to quickly get storage when you need it is what the cloud's really about. So if I could augment my cloud storage with, or let me turn that around, let me augment my on-prem storage with cloud as I get kind of that bursting need, but the bulk of my storage is on a very cost-effective platform, I think that becomes pretty interesting.
Agreed. And you know, where we're taking the platform, you know, going forward, we continue to invest in some of the things that Amazon has developed around S3. We're taking a look. They had some recent announcements at reInvent last year. Most notably, there's a feature called S3 Select, which is, you know, for those that want to take a look at that, we're looking at implementing some of those features of S3 as well, but we're still in the initial